So first off, let's do a quick A and B, and I'll just play like these first few bars and we can snap between the two so you can hear what we've done. I'm then going to go through the plugin chain and what I've done, and then I'm going to show you the how and why that I've got to each decision. So first off, A and B, let's turn everything off. Now, a huge part of this is the extra loudness. So first off, I'm going to do it without a loudness compensation, and then I'll do an A and B where I've got loudness compensation turned on in here, and we'll just bypass this tool that way. Alright, so let's have a look at what we've done differently to what I've taught and done in the past, based on what I've learned over the last couple of years and the new tools that we have inside Logic. The very first thing is I've got a compressor in as one of the first things. And in this case, for this particular track, I'm using the Platinum Digital because it is the cleanest. It doesn't add any extra noise. It doesn't have any finicky kind of things going on like the Studio FET, which I absolutely love, but it adds noise. It has some kind of weird release curve thing going on and whatnot. This, super clean. That's what I needed in this instance. Now, what I wouldn't normally do is also have the limiter stage in here as well. So let's just mute everything else off. So we can see it's very minimal compression on this main part of the track. This isn't the loudest part of the track. That would be about here. And we can see this is pulling back now by as much as like 3 dB in the extremes. But as a general rule, over the track, we're only controlling by about 1 dB. And that's just squeezing everything together just that little bit. And I've got this on a relatively slow attack, 32 milliseconds, and a relatively slow release at 86 milliseconds. And that is just giving a nice bounce, ebb and flow with how everything goes in with the track. You can't necessarily hear that 1 decibel happening, but it just helps everything glue together. And I'm going to say use your eyes a little bit here, but you can see how the needle kind of bounces with the track, and that's because the attack and release is working quite nicely in that regard, and that's why I've got those kind of timings. Now, there's nothing new and special about me compressing things just a little bit to glue everything together at the start. What I have done is the limiter here and pulling it back 5 dB. Now, the reason for that, this is a soft limiter effectively. You can still overshoot at 0. And I've pulled it back about 5 dB because what I'm doing is just grabbing these, like these erroneous, if we press E, we can see a little bit more, random big peaks. I'm just like chopping those off using that in a very soft way, a very transparent way, to the point that you can't actually hear it, but we know it's doing work at those moments. And we can see that right here. We'll see it flash up at those louder moments, but most of the time it's off. But there we go, catching those peaks just there. That's all it's doing. If I turn it off, like, it's definitely not adding 5 dB of loudness. And I'll be honest with you, I can't hear the difference. I just know that I want to reduce those peaks for later when I'm doing things like EQ and doing some boosts. When we go into the mastering limiter right at the end, those peaks are already taken care of. There's less work being done. There's less distortion or negative distortion likely to happen. Now, the other thing I've been toying with, but I haven't done in this instance, is actually using the soft distortion as a gain as well. What I mean by that is if we put the whole chain back in, So we've got about 1 dB of compression happening, but I've got no makeup gain going on, no auto gain going on. I have been using the distortion as the gain option because when we add distortion, it does lift everything up, basically into zero, and distorts it and brings it back down. So listen to the difference that this can make. It really is helping everything pop out up a bit more in the track, but it is making it louder. So we do need to compensate for that when we're A&Bing it and decide if the decision's right. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. I found that to be like a sneaky way just to help a bunch of extra things just pop through in the mix. Yeah, we're adding distortion at the master stage, but we're doing it in a nice musical way. Like I said, in this instance, I've decided not to use it, and I liked the kind of sound and everything we've got already. I've really worked in this track to kind of get a vintagey kind of distorted sampled vibe anyway. So we don't need to then enhance it and add that. But if we were adding, say, a B-side track and we wanted to kind of have the same feel, maybe we would use that soft distortion to kind of emulate the same feel and vibe with the two tracks being brought in together. But it's just something I've been using as maybe a makeup gain option. Speaking of makeup gain, like I said, nothing's been added. So technically, all we've done here is we've taken away around 1 dB on average for the main part of the track, up to 3-4 dB in the louder parts. And we're using the limiter just to chop off those extreme transients that we can't even really perceive that are in this track. Now, after that, I've got 2 EQs on the go. The very first one is the channel EQ, and it's just working in left and right mode. And all I've done here is correction. I've found something at 166 hertz that wasn't particularly nice. I've rounded that down a little bit, just 2.5 dB. We've got a little boost here around the 790, 800 range. I lifted up all the high end because adding the brightness was really nice, but here was already adequate, so I've brought that back by 2.5. So we get up here by 1, but we're bringing this back down 2.5 just because it brought everything else too much in that area. So let's check these out. Let's see, for 166 hertz, if I bring it right up, if I bring it up, is it rather unpleasant? Cool, super boxy, right? All I've done there is I've tamed that for 2.5, because once it was loud, it probably didn't sound as good as it should. I think this is probably going to help bring out those violins and vocals. Not even the 2 dB gain, just helping the track sound a little bit more flat is probably the right word, consistent in that area. Then this, like I said, because I brought the high end up, this was just becoming too much, right? It's not pleasant when it's loud. So we're just dialing that back a touch. And then this just adding some brightness. You should probably just hear that, like, the hi-hat sticks out a bit more. Then we've got a genuine use case for linear EQ. Now, you wouldn't do this in every track, but I found at moments, once I sort of adjusted that mid-range and brought the violins and things out a bit, that at times the vocal was getting reduced a bit. And I cut the left and right around this area, but I wanted to bring everything up in terms of the mids. So this is a linear EQ in mid only mode, and it's only focused on this area, and it's just giving a lift up to the vocals. If we take it away, and we can bring it back in. just helping the vocal stick out in that mid mix without touching the sides whatsoever. I did forget to mention actually on here I've also rolled off at 25 Hz because there's nothing down there. We just cleared it out, made sure. And next, already referenced that I was having like a little bit of harshness with this, and when you bring it up really loud, that area was still kind of unpleasant, but only at times. I didn't want to cut further away with the EQ and make it so that it was always dulled out in that area. So what we've got here is a de-esser, just catching those extreme moments. For the most part, it's not doing anything. You can see it's just catching them key moments. Max reduction 6 dB, the threshold of 10. Right around that similar frequency, this is where we landed on when we would have done this. We're just pulling that ever so slightly. So I've made those relatively minor corrections just to balance the whole track out. And then comes this guy. This is doing pretty much all the heavy lifting. When we switch this on, the track goes from sounding better to finished, right? So this tool basically has a look over your track and goes to some kind of guidance that isn't revealed anywhere as to where it thinks your track should be in terms of overall balance, which is where this wild looking EQ curve comes from. When they have this balance over here, which I've dialed back nearly 60% of what it says it should be, it should look like something like this. And even then, it's only making cuts like up to 3 dB. Just by me dialing it back where I dialed it back to, right there. Yeah, we're reducing that so it's only maybe doing decibel of adjustment all round. If you think it sounds right, you can pump it right up as Now if you want to particularly correct something, you can switch the custom EQ on, and maybe we wanted to lift back up like this 700 to 800 range like we had in our EQ already, that's kind of dialed back. A big part of this is the overall character option, right? That is currently set to punch. It initially set it to clean for me, which I don't like nearly as much. These characters make a huge difference to the overall tonality. And for me, clean is actually a lot more muffled for this music. Transparent was better. I get my thrills, I thought you were the right one. But punch works the best. Listen to that kick and snare that really drives this track. It disappears here. It's there, I can hear it, but it's not driving the track at all. Whereas here, so these characters make a massive difference to what you're doing. So you don't just trust it blindly. You absolutely need to check through these and listen to what's going to be right for your music. Now, talking about loudness, I need to punch it up quite a bit here, but we haven't used the exciter. The exciter was adding not a nice version of the compressor distortion here that we looked at before. So when we have excite on, it's too much and too harsh. All that clean, transparent energy that we work to get kind of gets lost. It just becomes this harsh mess. So we don't do that. But if we wanted to achieve that effect, I'd do it in the compressor early and pump it up like that. Loudness wise, it's loud, right? Minus 8.2 on the integrated low. buffs. If we went through the whole track, I think it comes out to about -8. That's because we've pushed the loudness here right up. I'm also giving it a little bit of width control because we're super in our correlation. So I've pushed it up a little bit just to give it a bit of width. We dial it back. It's really narrow. Just push it a little bit. Just gives some nice separation, especially in headphones. So now let's go over step by step how I got to here, how I made these decisions, and yeah, let's effectively remaster this track. So let's go over the decision-making process to get this to be a master. All right, let's just erase all of this. I'm going to reset channel strip. All right, so very first thing I want to do, listen through the whole track. I don't see the point in just playing the whole track back to you, but you would absolutely do that. The other thing is I would look to do a top and tail first. That's basically making sure there's no pops, clicks, etc. at the start. Now this track, I didn't do the best job in the world, and there is actually a little bit of like silence and a pop at the start. We can reveal it there. But if we were to play this back and you listen carefully, there's that little pop. I dislike that unless we've got like some like vinyl crack and we want the feel of it like being like popped and dropped in. It just kind of isn't good. So the very first thing I did was bring this right up, zoom ourselves in, and we're sort of looking for where the audio starts. Now we've got this little tool up here that lets us do that. We can just click and drag, and there it becomes exponentially pronounced to us, right? We can bring that right up like so, and then we just bring the littlest of fade in. So it's barely going to be noticeable, and we just switch that off so we've got our natural waveform back. And now that little puh at the start is gone. So we fixed the problem straight away, right? And we want to do the same thing at the end. Whenever I bounce a track, I'll leave everything at the end. So if there's like long reverb tails and stuff like that, unless I've specifically done like a filter or fade off, or there's something going on at the end, we want to just check what's there. So same process here. We can use our tool here to see what's going on with the audio, right? And in this case, there's just kind of some noise, and we just fade it out like so. Taking it into 0 and ending it where feels natural. Now what I would do here is find the loudest overall part of the track, and it's kind of the hooks here. And one thing I decided when I was listening through like the track was it did just need like a little something just to bring it together. The first thing I decided to bring in was the compressor, and as we've seen, we also use the limiter to tame some of these like wild transients that we've got in this track. The first thing I do, auto gain off. In this instance, I used Platinum Digital because I didn't want to add anything. This is a super clean compressor, and I wanted it to be pretty much constantly compressing. So we had the release up here at like probably 80, 81, 86, because that's a really nice release time for this BPM of music, which is up at like 174. And then the attack time, probably push that all the way to around 30. So it's quite a slow attack, and it's not really grabbing on those transients. If you were to sort of look at the waveform, it's going to be grabbing like here, and all this spiky stuff's going to get through in that 30 milliseconds and dissipate in that 30 milliseconds as well. So we're kind of gluing everything else together, letting those natural transients pass through, and the limiter's then going to catch those extreme ones. Ratio wise, I think I probably left it on like 2:1, and that's going to be completely fine in this case. So threshold, just bring it right up. And you know, I dialed it in, or I dial it in the area I want the glue to come together a bit more, which is around here. Right, so if you're struggling to hear like 1.5 dB of compression, which is completely normal, really focus in on the kick drum and the hi-hats and listen to their relationship and how that changes when the compressor comes in. And the fact they ebb and flow more together because they're now being processed together with the same timing. And that's the kind of thing I'm after. It's ever so slightly a pumping effect, right? Ever so slightly. If you listen to that relationship, you'll hear what I'm trying to achieve. I hope there's enough there for you to really hear what's going on, but like kick, snare, hat relationship, they all just kind of, the word is, glue together, even with just that 1 decibel of control. And because of the slow release, it's kind of bouncing in time all the time, which is really, really nice. So then limiter wise, we're going to pop that on. We ended up bringing it down to -5 dB. And what I would do is I'd find like some rogue transient kind of area to dial that in. We can see why I chose -5. Just as it goes over these extreme transients here, we can see the limiter kick in, and then it's leaving everything alone otherwise. And that's it. Now, I could have done the little distortion gain option. Considerably louder. Does have a nice effect. I just didn't need it in this track. Now at the extreme, we're bringing this down by like 3 dB. Auto gain's off. We could give ourselves gain back here, but there's really very little reason to do that. We're going to give ourselves some headroom to work with the EQ. So we're going to be able to bring boosts up, and we've already got some headroom that we're gaining by bringing down some of those extreme louder moments by a couple of dB. When we limit at the end, we're going to bring that gain way back up anyway. So we've got the control that we wanted. We don't need to add the extra gain. We've got the limiting, taming those extreme transients that are getting through the compressor. And now I'd want to go on to a little bit of corrective EQ from what I could hear. So let's see if we can end up doing something very similar. Now one of the first things I probably did is just took the low end out, because I know there's nothing below the sub right here. And the way I would have dialed that in is have it a couple of notes below the lowest fundamental, which probably would have led me to about 25. I'll often pop this to a -18 slope as well. Now in this track I could probably go up to 30 and not necessarily affect it, but if I do happen to have a really subby note later in the track that I'm missing in this observation, I would be losing that. So in terms of giving myself a little bit of room to work with, 25, taking out those just 5 hertz that we're not going to use at the bottom, making sure everything's cut away. Now the other thing, when I've listened through the track, I've normally taken some notes or made some observations. And I can't remember where it is. There, right there. There's a little bit of boxiness. And it comes somewhere around here. So I think I ended up taking that out just a little bit, probably around 2.5, maybe 3 dB. It just controls it in that area. What I'll do as well, I'll load up my chain afterwards and see how similar all my decisions ended up being. And then when sweeping through, somewhere around here, I think. I like that hi-hat just poking through a bit more, right? Just there. Just that extra little bit of brightness. But we definitely need to... But we need to control around here as well. It's around like 3k. Yeah, right around 3k. So I'm just going to dip that back a little bit. Only around 2 maybe. And the other thing was, I felt like the upper mids, I guess the upper mids, just needed a little bit more to shine through overall in the track. So what have we not used? Not used the yellow, and it was somewhere around here, right? Right around here. That just all lifts up the whole track. It's picking up the violins later here. And that body of the vocal. Just helps the song fill out a bit more. Now the other thing I wanted to do was bring the vocal out a little bit more, but without bringing out all the stereo elements. And because we've already got EQ happening here, and at each slope here we've got phase discrepancy. Here is where I'm going to legitimately use a linear EQ. So if we go down to EQ here, we've got linear phase. And we want it in mid mode, so we don't want phase discrepancies to be happening, because we're going to be boosting around a similar area to what we did before, and we'd cause phase cancellations. We can do this. And that would have just been somewhere around there. That's maybe a bit much, 1.5. I think that's a 1.5 dB adjustment, but it helps the whole track fill out more. Now, for you, the level here is going to be consistent unless you're adjusting on your end, but I'm adjusting my mix the whole time, going low and high. Now, when I pump this up nice and loud, like I'm doing now, it's still too harsh at moments up in the high end. And if you want to just crank it up on your end for a second, and see if you can determine that as well, at moments, it's maybe a little bit harsh, like when the snare comes in. Now we could go into the EQ for sure, and we could dip this area down, but we'd permanently be taking everything else out. And it's only harsh at moments when it's loud, which is why I came to end up using the de-esser. Now I can put this in filter mode like this, and I can dial in where I was hearing that harshness. It's about there for me. But I definitely don't want it to reduce by 20 dB, like 6 is probably going to be enough. And it's a case of dialing it in. Now, I don't want it to be dialed in necessarily on the harshest bit, I want it to catch the quieter elements here. Right, so it's not touching it at all here. But there's catching it by about the right amount. So now when I crank it up, has that harshness gone? And the answer is yes, but it's now maybe muted a bit much. So maybe I would just push that back 9.5. And there I'm feeling the master's pretty good. It needs its limiting and loudness aspect now. It sounds good. If I could get away with that and putting that out and that was loud enough, I would do it, but it's not. So now I've got two options. I could use a standard limiter, but the mastering tool built into Logic is doing a really great job. Now we have to get on the master channel to use this. So I'm just going to hit on output 1 and 2 and add the plugin, and it'll automatically scan the whole track and give us this profile. And that looks fairly similar to what we got back before. So listening back to this, one of the first things that I'm going to do is push this up and decide I probably don't like it and dial it back a bit. Alright, so just pulling that back there, I've stopped at 57%. That's what sounded right to me. I think we've lost a bit of those mids, so I am going to use the EQ here and maybe just bring some back in. About there. I can use the custom EQ to A and B it. It feels a lot nicer and rounder, which is definitely the sound that I really like here. And the second thing is the character. I remember I went for punch. And we can hear why immediately. It just suits this track so much better. And in terms of LUFS, if we hit start here, ideally we'd run it through the whole track, but we're going to need to pump that up quite a bit. We can use loudness compensation to where, we can now hear that compression without it getting louder and see how far we can push it. I think about there, it's probably about right. I'm just going to reset that. Probably going to go for something like minus 10 LUFS kind of range. And just be warned, I'm going to turn this off because I can monitor myself in my headphones, which is a much nicer option. So, count down on the screen, it'll come off. I saw you there first time, I thought that I would love you, but I would run to make love. I was on the marathon, feel free, I get my thrills, I thought you were the right one. You say love, I'll take off your ear shot, and when we were all done, I would say we're pretty much there. Have I got a gun in my hand? I like the width it's given. I like What I'll do is I'll play through these 4 bars and record this. I'll switch the process and we can see the decisions I just made on the other one, and we can A/B the 2 masters together. I thought you were the right one. Started all wrong. I saw you on the EQ, 2 hertz difference here, so very, very minimal. I've boosted a little bit louder up here, so made this one a little bit brighter. In terms of the linear EQ, yeah, I've boosted this much lower. I think I did this up at like 2K in the other one, but I think that's actually a better choice for a more rounded track. And de-esser wise, there's about 200 hertz difference, I think, and then 0.5 dB reduction difference. But overall, I would maybe sit and tweak and get those decisions a bit more in. I just did that one on camera in real time, so that's pretty spot on. Whereas the other one, I spent a lot more time dialing it in.